A millionaire with more wealth than most could ever dream of decided to test the very people who scrubbed his floors and emptied his trash. For cleaning ladies, each carrying struggles the world never bothered to see, suddenly found themselves holding black credit cards with no limits. For 72 hours, their choices would reveal more than resumes, more than years of service. Ethan Caldwell wanted to see who they really were when money erased the rules. 3 of them ran toward comfort, luxury, and the glitter of a life they thought they deserved. But one woman, she did something no one expected. Her silence, her restraint, her choice shook the foundation of power itself. Why would a simple cleaning woman refuse the chance of a lifetime? And how could her decision expose corruption at the very top? Before we start, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Ethan Caldwell had lived his entire life in the shadow of wealth. At 36, he was already the heir to a property development empire valued at nearly $500 million. The Caldwell name was etched onto glass towers across Denver, a constant reminder of a dynasty built on power and privilege. Yet beneath the polished surface of his life, Ethan carried a gnawing emptiness. To him, people didn't see Ethan the man, they only saw Ethan the millionaire. Every handshake, every smile, every friendship seemed tainted with the question, what can I get from him? The distrust ran deep. As a child, Ethan had watched acquaintances circle his father like vultures, pretending loyalty while draining resources behind closed doors. He promised himself he'd never be fooled the same way. By the time he inherited the company, suspicion wasn't just part of him, it defined him. In his office high above downtown Denver, Ethan looked out at the skyline and saw more walls than windows. Those who worked under him noticed the cold, distant demeanor. Employees described him as brilliant but unreachable. The Caldwell Tower cleaners, who polished the very floors he walked on, whispered about his sharp eyes that seemed to weigh and measure without ever offering kindness. Still, none of them could have predicted the experiment he was about to unleash. Among the cleaning staff were 4 women who kept the tower spotless long after the executives had gone home. Each carried her own history, her own wounds, her own hopes quietly tucked into the corners of life. Linda Parker, in her mid-40s, carried herself with the authority of someone who had seen too much disappointment. She complained loudly about bills and debts, yet never missed a chance to present herself as the leader of the group. Her sharp tongue often left co-workers silenced, but underneath her confidence lived a deep hunger for recognition and comfort she felt the world owed her. Then there was Maya Lopez, just 23, the youngest of them all. Outspoken, restless, and quick to voice her frustrations, Maya hated the idea of scrubbing floors for people who looked down on her. She dreamed of more fashion, independence, freedom, and often told anyone who would listen that she was underpaid and undervalued. Gloria Evans, in her late 50s, had spent decades in cleaning jobs. Time had worn down her body, but her heart still carried longing. She spoke often of retirement, of one day escaping the endless cycle of work into a life of comfort and leisure. Her daydreams became her only escape, and she clung to them like lifelines. And finally, there was Tiana Brooks. 29 years old, she had worked at Caldwell Tower for 3 years, always the first to arrive, often 2 hours early, and the last to leave. Quiet, disciplined, never complaining, she carried herself with a calmness that puzzled her co-workers. Some mistook her silence for lack of ambition, but there was a depth in her steady eyes that spoke of something more. She worked as if the job itself mattered, as if dignity could be found in the smallest task. Ethan noticed all of them, though he never let it show. To him, trust had to be tested, and character could only be revealed under pressure. The idea struck him late one night as he looked over company reports. If he truly wanted to understand the people under his roof, he needed more than resumes or time cards. He needed to know what they would do when faced with opportunity without limits. The plan was bold, almost reckless. Ethan would give each of the 4 women a black credit card, No spending limit, valid for 72 hours. No rules, no instructions. Just freedom. He would watch from the shadows, his assistant, Robert Hayes, tracking every transaction and every choice. Ethan believed money stripped away the masks people wore. When no one was looking, when no one was telling them what to do, their real selves would surface. What he didn't realize was that this experiment wouldn't just reveal the women's choices. It would expose his own blind spots, his own prejudices, and the fragile empire he thought was untouchable. The stage was set. For women, for cards, for very different lives. Some saw it as a golden ticket. Some saw it as a trap. And one of them, without saying a word, would turn Ethan's entire world upside down. The clock was about to start ticking. And when it did, the line between loyalty and greed, between justice and exploitation, between trust and betrayal would blur in ways none of them could predict. The moment the 4 cleaning women received their black cards, the atmosphere around Caldwell Tower shifted. What seemed like an ordinary workday became charged with excitement, suspicion, and silent calculations. Ethan, sitting in his glass-walled office, watched their reactions through discrete cameras and transaction updates delivered by Robert Hayes. Linda Parker was the first to reveal her hand. With a smile stretched too wide to be genuine, she slipped the card into her purse. Minutes later, she was already on the phone whispering about designer handbags and the kind of shopping spree she'd always imagined. Ethan barely raised an eyebrow. This was what he expected. Maya Lopez couldn't hide her glee. She bounced on her heels, nearly shouting with excitement as she clutched her card. To her, it was proof that the world owed her more than floor polish and cleaning rags. By evening, Robert reported that Maya had spent over $1,200 on clothes and accessories. Photos began popping up on her social media feeds. Selfies in store dressing rooms, captions about treating yourself, and hashtags that flaunted her new lifestyle. Gloria Evans reacted differently. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered gratitude to no one in particular. For her, the card symbolized an escape from decades of struggle. She wasted no time buying a 70-inch flat-screen TV and a leather couch that she bragged would make her neighbors envious. Over $3,000 disappeared in a single afternoon. Ethan smirked at her purchases, labeling them predictable signs of desperation. But the 4th card told a different story. Tiana Brooks didn't rush out to shop. She didn't post on social media. She didn't even mention the card to her colleagues. She slipped it quietly into her worn handbag, thanked Ethan with a steady gaze that unsettled him, and walked away. Hours passed, then an entire day. Her account showed nothing, no transactions, no activity. Ethan grew restless. By the 2nd day, whispers spread through the cleaning staff like wildfire. Linda leaned close to Maya in the break room, muttering that Tiana probably didn't even know how to use a credit card. Maya laughed loudly, suggesting maybe Tiana was too scared. Maybe she had a criminal record and thought she'd be tracked. Gloria stayed silent, but her silence was heavy with doubt. Tiana heard every word. Standing at the sink washing her hands, she listened to their laughter echo behind her. Years of prejudice had trained her to hold her tongue, to endure the sting of casual cruelty. Her silence was not weakness, it was a strategy. She had learned long ago that some battles drained you before they freed you. What the others didn't know was that Tiana had been planning something far greater than handbags and couches. She grew up in the East Side projects of Denver, raised by her grandmother Ruth after losing her parents in a car accident at 9 years old. Ruth had scrubbed floors by day, cared for patients at night, and pressed clean laundry into strangers' hands on weekends. She taught Tiana a single principle that burned like a torch in her memory. What you do when no one is watching is who you truly are. Now, with Ethan's card burning a hole in her purse, Tiana saw an opportunity to honor her grandmother's sacrifices. She spent her first 2 days making quiet calls, contacting old neighbors, checking on families struggling with food insecurity, seniors who couldn't afford medication, and schools where children went without supplies. On the third day, the card finally came alive. $690 at a discount grocery store. $280 at a school supply shop. $170 at a pharmacy for blood pressure and diabetes medication. $500 on children's clothing. She rented space at a community center in her old neighborhood. To Ethan, watching the numbers roll in, the purchases made no sense. No jewelry, no luxury, no indulgence. He was baffled. Robert confirmed her movements with growing amazement. "She isn't buying for herself," he reported. "She's stocking up for others. Families, kids, seniors." Ethan felt an unfamiliar weight in his chest. Respect, mixed with confusion. For the first time in years, someone had done something with his money he couldn't predict. But Linda got wind of Tiana's actions through a banking contact. She twisted the story before it reached Ethan's ears. "She's buying food in bulk, medicine, all kinds of things. That's suspicious. People like her don't always know boundaries," Linda said. Her voice sweetened with false concern but laced with prejudice. Ethan didn't correct her. Deep inside, his own biases stirred. He told Robert to watch Tiana more closely. What he didn't know was that bigger forces had already taken notice. Tiana's unusual spending triggered the attention of Marcus Reed, a federal investigator looking into Caldwell properties for tax evasion and financial misconduct. Marcus reached out quietly, explaining that Linda, Maya, and Gloria's card activity mirrored classic money laundering patterns. Large purchases followed by returns and hidden transfers. Without realizing it, they were pawns in a much larger scheme. Tiana, with her meticulous receipts and selfless purchases, became the unexpected key witness. She agreed to cooperate, gathering every receipt, every name, every detail. For years, her voice had been ignored, her discipline mistaken for invisibility. Now, her silence was about to speak louder than all their accusations combined. As the final hours of the experiment ticked down, tensions mounted. Linda prepared a folder of evidence to accuse Tiana of misusing the card. Maya scoffed about how Tiana would be exposed as a fraud. Gloria wrung her hands, torn between envy and fear. Ethan sat in his office, convinced he was about to uncover deceit. But Tiana was ready, and when the confrontation came, her truth would not only flip the experiment upside down, it would unravel the very empire Ethan believed was untouchable. The trap had been set, but not for the woman everyone doubted. The question was no longer what Tiana would do with her card. The real question was what would happen when Ethan discovered who had been using his power to exploit others all along. The third day arrived, and with it, the confrontation Ethan had been waiting for. In his office at the top of Caldwell Tower, the four women were called in one by one. Outside, the city skyline glittered, unaware that inside this glass fortress, reputations and futures were about to be decided. Linda came armed with confidence and calculation. She strutted into the office clutching a folder, her chin lifted high. "I think you'll want to see this," she said, sliding the papers across Ethan's desk. Inside were pages of notes and screenshots, twisted to suggest Tiana's spending was suspicious, even fraudulent. Bulk purchases of groceries, medicines, and school supplies were framed as evidence of theft or abuse. To Linda, it was the perfect trap, weaponizing prejudice against a woman she had always resented. Ethan leafed through the folder slowly. His expression was unreadable, but inside, his doubts festered. Could Linda be right? Could Tiana have taken advantage of him in a way he hadn't yet understood? The room grew tense when Tiana entered. She carried no folder, no papers, only the calm steadiness that had always set her apart. Yet behind her silence was a storm, years of injustice pressed into a single moment. She had endured whispers, doubts, and the sharp sting of discrimination too many times to count. This time, she refused to let it break her. Without waiting to be asked, she placed a worn binder on the table. It wasn't glossy like Linda's folder. It was plain, organized, meticulous. Inside were receipts, names, addresses, and contact information for dozens of families. Families who had received food, seniors who had received medication. Children are now holding brand new school supplies. Each line was proof not of greed, but of purpose. Ethan's eyes flickered as he flipped through the evidence. For the first time, the walls he had built around himself began to crack. Here was a woman who had been given the same chance as the others, yet instead of grasping for herself, she had lifted others. And still he hesitated. Linda's words echoed in his mind, dripping with subtle venom. People like her don't know boundaries. The silence was shattered by the opening of the office door. Marcus Reed, the federal investigator, stepped inside, flanked by 2 agents. Their badges flashed under the fluorescent light. The entire room froze. Marcus spoke with the authority of someone who had waited for this moment. He announced formal charges against Ethan Caldwell for tax evasion, racial discrimination, and money laundering through company accounts. Shock rippled through the women. Linda's smug expression collapsed into fear. Maya and Gloria stared wide-eyed, realizing too late that their own spending patterns had drawn suspicion. Marcus turned to Tiana. "Your records have been invaluable. Your courage to document every detail has given us what we need." In that moment, the power shifted. The millionaire who believed he could test others now found himself exposed, his empire crumbling. The women who had mocked Tiana were no longer laughing. They were facing investigations of their own. And Tiana, the one dismissed as invisible, had become the key to uncovering the truth. But the sting of injustice was not erased by victory. As Ethan listened to the charges against him, his gaze flicked to Tiana. Instead of offering gratitude, his silence carried the weight of betrayal. For 3 years, she had worked under his roof, unrecognized and underestimated. And now, in the moment her integrity shone brightest, she saw in his eyes the same doubt that had shadowed every step of her journey. It was then she spoke, not with anger, but with clarity sharpened by years of silence. She told him that when he chose to believe Linda's lies over her quiet record of loyalty, he revealed where she truly stood in his world. A man who doubts someone's honesty in 3 seconds doesn't deserve her loyalty for 3 years. Her words cut through the room with a precision no folder of accusations could match. The agents began collecting evidence, boxing up files from Ethan's office, their movements echoing like a verdict. The once mighty empire of Caldwell Properties was being dismantled piece by piece, right before his eyes. Linda clutched her folder as though it could shield her. But even she knew her time was up. Maya and Gloria shifted uneasily, their dreams of easy comfort dissolving into fear of legal consequences. Tiana stood steady, watching it all unfold. For years, she had been underestimated, doubted, and even mocked for her silence. Now, her strength spoke louder than any of their accusations. Yet she knew the cost of this moment. Vindication did not erase pain. Justice did not heal scars. The air in the office grew heavy, charged with the weight of endings and beginnings. Ethan's world was collapsing, the women's illusions shattered, and Tiana's quiet resilience had risen to the center of it all. But the story wasn't over. The fall of a millionaire was only the beginning of what Tiana would build from the ruins. The question lingered like a thundercloud. When justice finally cracks open the walls of power, what comes next for the one who dared to stand tall in the storm? 2 months after the confrontation inside Caldwell Tower, the world around Ethan Caldwell and his empire looked very different. The polished glass building that once stood as a symbol of his untouchable power now carried the stain of scandal. Headlines across Denver told the story of a millionaire brought down not by rivals or competitors, but by the very workers he had overlooked. Linda Parker, once so eager to point fingers, was sentenced to 18 months in prison for laundering and workplace discrimination. Her sharp tongue and false confidence could not shield her from accountability. Maya Lopez and Gloria Evans, though spared prison, were fired and left to face civil lawsuits from former employees who had suffered under Caldwell Properties. Their dreams of quick luxury dissolved into courtrooms and debt. And Ethan himself, once heir to a $450 million fortune, lost everything. His company was dissolved, his assets liquidated, and his name dragged through investigations that exposed not only financial crimes, but a pattern of discrimination buried within company policies. He was no longer the man in the glass tower. He was just another face behind the counter of a small cafe in downtown Denver, working shifts to pay off legal fees. But where their lives fell into ruin, Tiana Brooks began to rise. The same media outlets that had once ignored her existence now told her story with reverence. She became a symbol of integrity in the face of prejudice, of quiet strength that spoke louder than wealth. With the national attention, she launched the Ruth Brooks Foundation, named after the grandmother who had taught her that true character is revealed when no one is watching. The foundation began small, an office downtown with a modest team of volunteers, but its mission was clear: to provide free legal aid to workers facing discrimination, along with affordable healthcare access for families priced out of the system. Within just 2 months, the foundation had already supported over 120 families and recovered $1.6 million in compensation for wronged employees. The same money once used to exploit others was now fueling justice. For Tiana, the transformation was not about revenge. It was about redemption, not just for herself, but for every woman who had been silenced, every worker dismissed as invisible, every voice drowned out by power. She carried her grandmother's memory into every case, every family helped, every injustice overturned. Ethan, stripped of privilege, began showing up quietly at the foundation. No longer a man of influence, he offered his administrative skills as a volunteer. Some saw it as a bid for redemption. Others saw it as a hollow gesture. For Tiana, it was neither forgiveness nor condemnation. It was proof that even those who had stood on the wrong side of justice could still choose to use their hands for something good. The story did not end in a courtroom or an office. It lived on in the lives of those families who now had food on their tables, children with school supplies, and seniors with medication. It lived on in the reminder that character is not measured by the power you hold, but by what you choose to do with it. At the Denver Citizen of the Year award ceremony, Tiana stood on stage in front of hundreds, holding the plaque that bore her name. She told the crowd, "2 years ago, I was just a cleaning lady. People thought I didn't know my place. Today, I run a center that proves our place is exactly where we choose it to be." Her words echoed far beyond the walls of that room. Somewhere in the back, Ethan clapped quietly, his eyes lowered but his hands steady. And miles away, in a prison cell, Linda listened to the news broadcast and finally understood what it meant to feel the weight of discrimination from the other side of the bars. Tiana's journey was not just about one woman and one millionaire. It was about a larger truth that stretches into every workplace, every city, every life touched by racism and injustice. It was a reminder that silence does not equal weakness, that dignity can outlast prejudice, and that justice, though slow, can still rise from the most unexpected places. And so the question remains, one every viewer must carry after the credits fade. When the world gives you power, whether through money, position, or privilege, do you use it to lift yourself or to lift others? Because in the end, the true measure of a life isn't the wealth you keep, but the justice you create. You've just seen how one woman's courage reshaped the lives of so many and exposed the truth behind power and prejudice. Stories like this remind us that silence can hide injustice, but standing firm can change everything. If this journey moved you, imagine how many others need to hear it too. So, before you go, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll never miss the next story that challenges, inspires, and makes us think deeper.